When the Romans came to Britain, one of their great atrocities was the destruction of the Iceni tribe, and the famous defeating of Boudicca, the wife of the Iceni king, Prasutagus. Boudicca is something of a symbol of womanly power and leadership in the face of great destruction, and although the Romans won out, Boudicca was a thorn in the side for the Romans in Britain. There could have been a world, though, where Boudicca took the reins in a different era, an era where she could exercise her skills to be something greater than a thorn. Perhaps she could act as the bramble for a new invader to Britain, the Saxons. The only difference of note, as far as Boudicca was concerned, was that these invaders tended to have beards. This is Boudicca, as I've created her. She's a pagan Pict, which I chose somewhat arbitrarily. I chose pagans as it somewhat maps onto Druidic faiths in pre-Roman Britain, and I chose Pictish culture because it reflects some of the oldest Celtic inhabitants of Britain, even though Picts are not from England. I could have chosen Welsh, but it felt too normal. I wanted Boudicca to be something unique from everything around her, so she's Pictish. She's brave, zealous, and wrathful, which feels appropriate given her history. We're dropping in as East Anglia, which is where the Iceni tribe lived in the Roman days. The first thing on Boudicca's mind is, of course, to secure her realm. There are raiders and conquerors all around her, none of whom are friendly. It seemed that the invaders in the north were more amicable than the southern ones, so for that reason, Boudicca took a husband named Ubba, who apparently was the son of some famous Northman. Whatever his reputation, Boudicca needed a friend on the island, and the Jarl of Jorvik seemed appropriate. Her plan was to play the invaders against each other, and then eventually become strong enough to defeat both of them. During times of war between the invaders, she'd often go and raid southern Britain, knowing that the Saxons were too busy to respond. She'd have felt guilty for pillaging her own homelands, but she knows that it must be done if they were to be liberated. Unfortunately, other Northmen would often raid her home while she was out raiding. For now, Boudicca would have to just let it happen since she had no real recourse, but one day she'll have her revenge. If anything, her zeal was only strengthened by these raids, making her fight even fiercer. With her money stored and her husband's lord finally out of war, Boudicca turned her wrath to the Mercians, who seemed weaker than their allies in the south. Indeed, this Alfred fellow was quite the scary opponent, which Boudicca would need time to take down. With Jorvik's help, the Mercians didn't stand a chance, and luckily for Boudicca, it seemed the southern Saxons didn't come to their defense. As an even greater victory, Boudicca gave birth to her first son, Alexander. The name was suggested by the Druids, who foresaw that he would bring about great conquests should Boudicca continue down the righteous path. When news of the Mercians' defeat came to Alfred's ears, though, he went from a relatively ambivalent view of Boudicca's realm to a hostile one. He claimed that the heathen queen of East Anglia was illegitimate and a thief. Boudicca turned red with rage and declared that Alfred would die by her hand one day, and her campaign to rid Britain of the invaders became solely focused on the Saxons. This was only logical, considering that for the time being, the Northmen were her allies. Despite her angry words, it was clear that Alfred was extremely powerful. Boudicca could no longer raid his lands unless his armies were campaigning elsewhere. With that in mind, she went off to Wales to find better opportunities. It was during this raiding campaign that some of her followers felt she might have been losing the plot. Of anyone in Britain, the Welsh were not invaders, so why would she go after them? It was clear that for Boudicca, things were personal. Was it still even about freeing Britain? That was a good question. The Druids of the realm predicted that Boudicca's unfettered rage would delegitimize her in the eyes of the gods, which she of course ignored. That ignorance was paid back in full by Mother Earth, who took away Boudicca's son, Alexander. Although she was saddened at his loss, Boudicca continued raiding the Welsh, believing it to be her only option. The Druids could only tell her their divinations, and it seemed that Boudicca's future was, at best, uncertain, and at worst, cursed. Anything to destroy Alfred, she thought. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear, as during a raid in Gwynedd, the weather took a turn for the worse, and Alfred himself was there, vacationing in his country home. What an opportunity. It seemed that this could be the opportunity Boudicca needed to get her revenge. She and her men raided the home, but alas, all they found was plunder. Alfred must have escaped, knowing that without his army, he was nothing. Needless to say, diplomatic relations between the two only worsened. On the way home from Wales, Boudicca gave birth to a daughter, who she named after herself. This was a precaution. In case the gods would strike her down for her raids on the Welsh, she'd at least have a daughter carrying her name to destroy Alfred. After some time settling back at home and giving birth to her second daughter, Noelina, Boudicca went after the Mercians once again. Her combined strength with the Northerners made her without reproach. The war was relatively understating, given that the Mercians simply stood no chance without Alfred to save them. Boudicca, despite apparently being cursed by the gods, seemed to be blessed with more and more children. Almost as quickly as she gave birth to her second daughter, she became pregnant and gave birth to a third daughter, Oya. Ubba was turning out to be more than just a political ally, and over time, Boudicca and Ubba fell in love. They went on fishing trips together, and Ubba seemed to share Boudicca's dislike for Alfred. Both people had reason to hate the Saxons, and that brought them ever closer. Things started to calm down a little for Boudicca here. She spent time with her daughters to prepare them for the future while only conquering Lincoln, since it was a vulnerable realm. She was somewhat worried that her northern allies might not like her encroaching on their region, but perhaps her love Ubba could smooth things over back home. On the way back home from Lincoln, she gave birth to a new son, Kinead, which she took as a sign from Mother Earth that her path was righteous. The gods wouldn't give her a son without their blessing, would they? Yet that blessing didn't last, as during the naming ceremony for Kinead, an uninvited guest barged his way in. It was Alfred. What was he doing here? Boudicca would have had him arrested, but somehow she enjoyed the yelling matches. The anger and the passion were almost as invigorating as being on the battlefield. There was something different. Alfred wasn't just mad, he was furious. He had heard of the war with the Mercians and demanded that Boudicca stop. She refused and told him he'd be next. The world stopped for a minute as they locked eyes. The court stood silent, waiting for Alfred's response to what was ostensibly a death threat. Alfred turned his back, scoffing. "We'll see how you talk when I get my hands on you," he muttered as he walked out with his huskarls. Some at the court said he was blushing. Boudicca felt a little confused in the moment and stammered. She ordered the druids to resume the naming ceremony and let her husband take over. She went to her chambers and suddenly reconsidered her relationship with Alfred. Was he not exactly the kind of man she wanted? Only time could tell. It would seem that Alfred's visit had more than put a spell on Boudicca's heart, though. It seems no son of hers may live, as Kinnead also passed away in infancy. Was this a curse from the gods for her feelings towards Alfred? She shook it off. Perhaps her daughters were simply preferable as heirs anyway. The realm was relatively calm from then on, with Boudicca spending more time introspecting and surprisingly making trips to Wessex for diplomatic purposes. It seemed that the two couldn't stop yelling at each other, as even Alfred made trips to Norfolk to continue the shouting matches. Before long, the entire island started to calm down, as Alfred of the Saxons and Halfdan of the Northmen signed a treaty to split England between themselves. This was inopportune for Boudicca, who had hoped to play them against each other longer, and yet she didn't seem concerned. With peace coming to Britain, she made more trips to Wessex with fewer and fewer guards. Despite the hostile relationships, she felt safe in Wessex. Alfred and Boudicca even began battling out their differences in the field. Were they really fighting as rivals, or as lovers? In their first fight, Boudicca was defeated, and Alfred towered over her. She wasn't afraid, though. In some sense, she was honored. On her return, Boudicca announced yet another pregnancy and later gave birth to her third son, Yoke. Would this son survive infancy? Only the gods know. Acclimating herself to a family life, Boudicca felt unsuited to the role, but tried her best for her family. During times of stress, she often found herself wishing she'd be in some yelling match or duel with Alfred. She went to visit him again in Winchester, where they actually had their first amicable interaction. It seemed as both rulers aged, they mellowed out. By this point, a decade of rivalry was finally cooling off, as the two enjoyed some light reading of the Bible. The book was nice, but Boudicca inched closer to get a better view of the book. At first, Alfred protested that a heathen was invading his personal space, but that only made her get closer. Now the book was closed, and Boudicca was opening something else. Alfred and Boudicca made love for the first time that night, and a truly unholy relationship had begun. Despite their personal, political, and ideological enmity, the two were a match made in heaven. When she came home, Boudicca hadn't been so happy in years. She checked on her son, Yoke, who was entering his third year of life. He seemed healthy. Perhaps he'd live. With new love and a healthy family, Boudicca's ambitions seemed to have been quelled. Was there really a need to take Britain back? Between Alfred and Ubba, these invaders seemed pretty nice. That was, of course, until Alfred came by to tell Boudicca that their night of passion was a mistake. Indeed, as far as he was concerned, it never happened. They yelled and fought, but it seemed that what Boudicca thought was love was to Alfred simply lust. The flame of ambition was once again ignited, and Boudicca seemed to regress to her old self. Now, not a single Saxon could be allowed to escape her wrath. She immediately challenged Alfred to a duel with the intention to win this time. Alas, despite her rage, Alfred was simply too strong for her. This time, upon her defeat, she was not honored, but disgraced. Boudicca once again joined forces with the Northerners in Jorvik and helped them to conquer Wales. This was, once again, a concern to the Druids, who couldn't help but comment on Boudicca's hot-headed nature. With her allies aided, she first went on a raiding campaign through Wessex, as a way to test Alfred's mettle. He didn't even put up a fight at first. That was probably the most insulting thing he could have done. He did eventually meet Boudicca in battle and defeat her. It seemed no matter what, Alfred always had the upper hand. Boudicca had enough, and declared a war to take East Anglia. Control over the River Thames would cut off much of the trade that Wessex was enjoying, and using her allies in the Danelaw and Sweden, she was certain she could defeat Alfred. She met her opponent in the woods of Bedford, and won a close battle. From there, she besieged London and the Thames Plains. With a second victory, and London occupied, Boudicca declared victory, and Alfred signed a peace deal. As part of her fuming hatred, she immediately revoked all titles from the local Saxon lords, despite the tyrannical nature of her actions. She would tolerate neither Saxons nor Christians in the realm. Despite the recent military loss, Alfred challenged Boudicca to another duel. How could she refuse? She defeated him as a strategist, now she only needed to defeat him in single combat to prove her superiority. This time, Boudicca won, and Alfred scampered home with his tail between his legs. Maybe the now 52-year-old man was simply losing his fighting ability. Back at home, Yoke was finally grown up, and he was much less of a hothead than his mother. Although he was equally as ambitious. He was more of a pragmatic kid. He'd make a fine ruler, surely, although Boudicca didn't approve of his down-to-earth attitude. After the truce with Alfred ran out, Boudicca once again called in her allies to help her take more land from the Saxons. This time Mercia was up for grabs, and with confidence, Boudicca charged into battle. The combined Pict and Swede might was too much for the Saxons, who crumbled. Throughout the course of the war, Alfred's injuries from duels and from the battles he had been in finally caught up to him, as he died during the Mercia campaign. There was no victory sweeter than to outlive your rival and your traitorous lover. There could have been peace in Britain, Boudicca thought, but not when men scorn women so. The new king, Peter, one of Alfred's accursed spawn, was merely a boy with none of the power of his father. He would be a joke in comparison, and the future of the Brythonic people, at least in southern England, was assured. As was already common practice, Boudicca revoked all the territory from any Saxon lords that tried to pay her fealty and reassigned them to Picts. In the interim of truces with England, Boudicca paid special attention to her children and hoped to impart her wisdom to them. Without Alfred to cloud her mind, she was once again able to raise her children and govern her realm without distraction. There were rumors around the realm that apparently some people were out to kill her. She couldn't think of who besides the Saxon king, Peter, but what was there to worry about? She had already purged the realm of any traitorous Saxon lords. For her next conquest, Boudicca went after Huicha, which would let her connect her kingdoms to the Irish Sea. She'd finally be a coast-to-coast realm, granting her much legitimacy in the eyes of all Britons, both foreign and native. She kept the Stonehenge in Wiltshire under her own personal care and left the rest of the land to the various Pictish lords. With the coast connected, Boudicca declared herself queen of the lands between the invaders. She would name it Prittania, after a prestigious Celtic tribe whose name deserved preservation. She gave it a tree with autumn leaves as its symbol, in reference to the beauty of a British autumn and dedication to nature that any good Celt ought to have. With her realm forged, England was now a tripartite state of Saxon England, Britannia, and the Danelaw. Boudicca was reaching quite the age now, and knew that she wouldn't live to see all of Alba liberated. But she could at least know that her heirs would do it in her name. Before her death, she would finally conduct her first campaign against her once allies in the Danelaw. She had legal rights to Staffordshire, which the Danes wouldn't simply hand over. It seemed that all pretenses of friendship had finally fallen, and Boudicca was staking herself as a friend to no foreigner in Britannia. Her first goal was to free her Welsh compatriots, who she had once been blinded to. While in the past they were a source of plunder, she now saw herself as their protector. Boudicca attacked the boy king Peter and took southern Wales from him. In her old age, Boudicca finally started to break down. Her two eldest daughters both passed away before her, and she took to a drinking habit because of it. One day, in a drunken stupor, she challenged the King of England to a duel. Despite his weakness compared to Alfred, he was a young man in his 20s, while Boudicca was a frail woman in her 70s. Who do you think will come out on top? Was it unchivalrous for Peter to even accept such a duel? Probably. But why would he pass up an opportunity to take down his father's ultimate rival? Peter easily defeated Boudicca and inflicted a severe injury on her. This time, Boudicca wouldn't recover, as she passed away from a combination of alcohol poisoning and injuries. Some say she died a shadow of herself, but others say that anyone who accomplishes their life goal will find themselves falling to hedonism. This left the nicely situated realm of Prittania in the hands of Deokileman, whose succession was not questioned, although his rulership was something most were wary of. You see, Deokileman, the king of the Prittani, had a bit of a reputation even before being king. Although he hadn't killed anyone, the Druids saw in him the stolen spirits of his brothers who died in infancy. This made most of the realm see him as both a murderer and kinslayer, despite his best efforts to be a good guy. He was certainly a skilled ruler who wouldn't let salacious rumors ruin his rule, but he was hindered by the family curse his mother brought on him. Deokileman didn't help that curse much when his first action as king was to steal away land from his Welsh subjects for reappropriation to Pictish lords. Was the curse real? Could it even be proven? That's pretty much impossible, but one thing that's for sure is that Deokileman's rule was tenuous. He didn't accomplish much before being poisoned at the very dinner celebrating his rulership. He had only ruled for 3 years. It was told by the record keepers of the realm that rogue Welsh lords must have been the ones to poison his drink. With his death, Deokileman's realm was split between his daughters Bronwyn and Caitrion. The new queen was only a child at 9 years old. The realm groaned at the thought of being ruled by some kid who had yet to prove herself to anyone. Maybe she'd grow to be a skilled ruler. Time could only tell. That being said, time didn't have much to tell since both sisters, Bronwyn and Caitrion, died in one freak accident. How the murderers completed both assassinations at exactly the same time is unknown to this day, but both sisters passed away, leaving the title to some distant cousin named Noilina, who was even younger than both sisters. Now the realm was truly panicking. The curse was real, and the whole realm knew it. Who would have thought that Boudicca's need for wealth to destroy the Saxons would have left her family in such shambles? Would Prittania fall? Most likely not, since no matter how Boudicca's line continues, some other Pictish lord could take over in her place. Even if she could live, Noilina was already a lost cause, for she was born with a defective womb, according to the Druids. What that even meant to a 5-year-old was difficult to ascertain. All Noilina knew was that she was scared. She heard that her cousins were killed by a curse on her entire family. Why would the curse spare her? And indeed, the curse did not spare her. The Welsh curse took down Noilina as it had her predecessors. She died eating an apple tart, emblematic of the same misguided greed of Boudicca. With no heir left in the family, Boudicca's line, and the Iceni line, was wiped out, leaving Prittania to be ruled by the remaining Picts of the land. That was the story of Boudicca, and her attempt to take Britain back for her people. Although here she had more success than against the Romans, it seemed that the Celts of Britain would not reclaim Britannia under her name. It's unknown whether the Picts of the Midlands would be able to hold off Danish raids or if they'd follow the Saxon reconquest. What is certain is that no Welsh subject of any British realm would ever be mistreated, for the story of Boudicca and her cursed line spread as far as Greece. Although usually not superstitious, it became the norm for all lords to respect Welsh sovereignty, choosing to either not conquer their land or let them rule with autonomy, paying only lip service to their lieges. In a way, perhaps Boudicca had truly saved the Britons. Although not Pictish, the Welsh are a Brythonic people, and their security was indeed secured due to her legacy. Let me know what you think, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for your time.